Ryan Cristiàn is here from the Last American Vagabond news service, independent news, and also resident of Tennessee because we're going to be talking about Tennessee. They are potentially banning geoengineering. Ryan's going to tell us what even that means. I have posted on Locals where you can support my work, AllisonMorrow.locals.com, $5 a month, and put in questions ahead of time for people like Ryan. And there's a lot of good questions there. So thanks to those of you on the editorial board. But Ryan, why don't we first start with a primer on geoengineering in case people have never heard about this? And then we're going to go into the coverage of it because, of course, it's really interesting to see how the media is looking at it, saying that, that basically this has been one allusion to, and after another towards conspiracy theory, and that this bill is really much ado about nothing. So let's start with what is geoengineering?
I hadn't seen these headlines like that, which I totally expected. How in the world are we still pretending like this is conspiracy theory while we're literally talking about it? But you asked the most important question in the beginning there. First of all, to your main opening point there, geoengineering. I would imagine most people are familiar, whether it's the kind of like cartoonish framing of what we call chemtrails, which is not an inaccurate term. It's oversimplified, quite frankly. There's a lot more going on than just chemicals, if even any, and there's other things that are being used. But this is a provable reality that goes back as far as you can look, well before even the concept of like cloud seeding, which is a classically understood, very public conversation that even then gets folded in with conspiracy theory dismissals. But it's a very real thing where, they've studied this forever, where they can put certain things in the different layers of the atmosphere. That's what we'll get to your other question, your other point about what this is actually banning. But that ultimately it's about trying to, produce rain, at least the general idea. But there's been experiments going on a long time. Like there's even an interesting overlap in regard to things like Operation Sea Spray, which was the U.S. government spraying in the atmosphere over the Bay of San Francisco in regard to testing biological problems and whether we're protected and what that would do in the atmosphere, right? So it's like they've been doing stuff like this forever. And so what's important is that that does cross over a long time ago into actual geoengineering. Stratospheric aerosol injection is like the general term we talk about, but that's a specific location and certain practice. Like, so this is where we get into the point that what actually, interestingly enough, in San Francisco, they're doing again, and this overlaps with the bigger point, is that they're right now, I'm going to cover this soon, they're talking about spraying aerosols. But the article specifically talks about salt crystals, which makes it seem sort of benign, but there's issues along with that too we can get into. But it also just includes, that's only one thing of a larger plan of like aerosols. And that includes things we've talked about, barium, aluminum, they even mentioned in the article, And so the point is, this is a bigger thing, and they're acting like it's an experiment, but you're spraying it in the atmosphere above everybody. This isn't like a controlled experiment. This is, you can call it an experiment, but it's not, they're framing it as like some kind of lab tested, we're finding out if it's safe. You're doing it over everybody. And it's been going on a long time. Back to Tennessee, and we should probe into all that stuff. There's a lot of interesting points there. The Tennessee part of it is important because I think that the pushback is genuine, is insofar as I think any of these are genuine. Like to me, that would ultimately mean at best, because I'm jaded about this, that they see a benefit in fighting for what they see as what we see as the right side. Most Tennesseans do not want this stuff. They don't want vaccines in their food and all this other stuff that I see a lot of good politicians in Tennessee pushing back against, trying to stand up and say, we don't want this happening. We don't want geoengineering. My point is that I don't know whether that means I think they truly don't want this or they just see a political benefit in it. Either way, it's the right thing, because most people here don't want this. And we know that there's a lot of problematic overlaps. The most obvious is that we don't know what the byproducts of this stuff will be. And they'll happily admit that when really pushed. And so this is why it's good to see Tennessee pushing back. But the issue that you raise is important, because when you read this, there's all sorts of loopholes where you can argue that, well, okay, let's just say we don't deem the definition of this version of it as weather modification, or specifically the locations that they discuss or the names for it. It's a good example would be like during the COVID-19 illusion, where they just decided to change the term from gain of function to EPPP research. Literally on a dime, just said a different term. And then when they got called, they said, no, we don't. We do EPP. That's not, we don't even know what gain of function is. And so that's what I think this could be used as. I can't speak to whether the politicians in Tennessee are doing that on purpose or, because I think it's actually pretty sound bill, quite frankly. But as always, I see openings for how this could be manipulated, and that's the biggest problem, is that on top of that, are they even going to care? because they've been denying it's happening for 30 years. So what, just keep doing it.
Yeah.
And, so that's the good opening right there. But I think that it's a good step. And I think that individuals in their states need to continue to push stuff like this, because this is an experiment with your life. And it's dangerous. And the things they're using right now, you can prove have, like, specifically aluminum barium. I mean, aluminum directly connects with things like Alzheimer's. And one of the leading issues in the UK in particular is Alzheimer's, and they're spraying like crazy. I don't know how we ignore stuff like that. But then the salt point, I just want to end with that on San Francisco. Even something as benign as that, what is that going to do to farms and crops and rain and whether or not there's like the over, like, ends up, let's see, oversaturation of salt in the rain? Well, that will directly affect all sorts of things. And that's the biggest problem, is they don't take into consideration or don't care about the byproducts of the surrounding areas. Like, for example, in South America, I've covered a story where it was actually like a car company that was utilizing these things. And this is like the classic idea. These have been around for so long. These big engines that like pump steam and stuff into the sky that have a literal direct effect on the weather. And I don't know why we don't call that weather modification. It is. And the surrounding farmland were, oh no, it was the other way around. I take it back. It was that basically they were trying to protect these certain areas. No, I'm sorry. I'm getting mixed up on it. That was right. So it was a car company that is doing this to stop the hail from hitting the cars. And I'm just trying to remember, I covered this a while ago. The point was the farmlands, the people in the area, in this South American area, basically nobody cares whether they're being taken advantage of. We're screaming that we're not getting any rain anymore. So we're losing our jobs, losing our entire livelihoods. Nobody cared. But guess what? The car company stopped the hail, so they didn't get any more dents on their cars. I mean, that's exactly what we're talking about. So go ahead.
To your point about how long this has been going on, I found this paper from the University of Florida, which says that Florida recognized the potential problems associated with weather modification when it enacted Chapter 57-128 laws of Florida in 1957,
Right.
which now appears, as this other section in Florida statutes, and that they experimented in South Florida with weather modification during the droughts of 1981. One of the things that I think is really interesting, too, that they're willing to admit in this document, which I'm not totally sure when this was written, but it says that the potential benefits of such technology are immense, but so are the dangers. Flooding after cloud seeding has led to claims that the weather modification caused the adverse results. Another problem that is developed in the area of weather modification is a direct result of the fact that overuse by people of a limited resource diminishes the supply of that resource available to others. Cloud seeders in the state of Washington induced clouds to release rain before the clouds could reach the state of Idaho. The result, Idaho almost sued Washington for rain theft. And I think it's really interesting to read stuff like that, because when you read articles like this, there's rarely ever any downfall that is discussed. The fact that you could be manipulating weather patterns to the destruction of humankind, that you could be adding chemicals to our water supply,
right?
Any number of things, or even just the rain theft issue. I just think it's fascinating how positive the media examines weather modification. So I want to go into that next. Don't forget though, if you're like, I'm done with this, I'm going to go into my bunker because the airplanes are flying over my house right now. Hopefully you have internet down there and you can get to AllisonWinePromo.com and get yourself some extremist altitude wine, support the show. We're starting a wine club, folks. We have now opened it up to global extremism. So we've got wines from France, from Italy, from Spain, and of course, your favorite extremist, high altitude, Argentina. We're going to start drinking them together. We're going to meet the people who are bringing these wines in. If we can find somebody who's actually got internet that makes the wines, which is highly unlikely because they probably have worse internet than I do. It's hard to believe, but these are very small operations. But we will get them on and we'll find somebody to translate because most of them speak Spanish. That said, you don't want to eat or drink the crappy wine your friend makes in their basement while you're waiting for the apocalypse or the chemtrails to go away, but you want the experience of handcrafted wine, then this is a wine for you. AllisonWinePromo.com. Join the club and join the experience. It's going to be a fun one. It will be great to see you at the wine club meetings.